8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome everybody, I'm Graham Ledger, live and local, well at least local where I am, and you're local where you are, so we can say live and local. Hope it's a beautiful day wherever you are, because it is beautiful here. It is one of those go do it kind of days, as Pete Giddings. Any of you who grew up in San Francisco, as I did, in the 80s, the 70s and the 80s, I think Pete Giddings was on this ABC affiliate, KGO, for many, many years. He was a weatherman. He'd say, hey, if it's good weather, go do it. And good weather in San Francisco amounted to less fog than normal. But where I am, there's plenty of sunshine. In a double secret location somewhere in the continental United States. I hope you're enjoying your day. If you'd like to get a hold of me, please chat me at the little chat column next to, if you're watching on YouTube, in that column there. If you're watching on Rumble, we'll have to get back to you at another time. You can leave a note and we'll get it one way or another. But the bottom line is you can hit me with the chat live in the column to the right of YouTube, or you can send me an email and I'll try and get to it live on the air here. GrahamLedger411@gmail.com. GrahamLedger411@gmail.com. I have some great news on the post office, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'll get to that a little bit later in the program. But it's from the Trump administration, of course, and it aligns with almost exactly what I have been pleading for many, many years, well before Donald Trump, and that is that the post office needs not an overhaul. You can't fix something that's completely broken, and the post office is broken. Just the post office is emblematic of the entire United States government. It is broken, it is bloated, it is filled with too many workers who are there because they want a cush job and a cush retirement. And that's it. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but that's it. Are there some good postal workers? Of course. Are there some sane postal workers? Yes, of course. Not every one of the workers at the post office goes postal. But the bottom line is, it's a disaster. And you can't fix it. It's not fixable. It's just not, because there's a mentality there. So there needs to be a paradigm change. Speaking of paradigm change, I think that is what we are witnessing in Washington, D.C. right now. Compliments of the Trump administration 2.0 and DOGE. But remember, DOGE and Elon Musk, and Elon is maybe more of a master at publicity than Donald Trump, if you think about it, because Elon has a platform that he bought. It's called formerly Twitter, X. And he's a smart guy. He's a billionaire. He's promoted it. He's a master at self-promotion. He's even more flamboyant about it than Donald Trump, if you think about it, and the way he talks and the way he gets into people's grill, as we like to say. It's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing him. It's just his modus operandi, his MO. And so we have these two billionaires and two mega promoters out of Washington, D.C. right now, looking under all the rocks. And it's making a lot of people very uncomfortable. And as usual, when the radical left, the Marxists, have nothing on, they're not doing any wrong, of course, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. They're working on behalf of all the American people. But when the left smells trouble, what do? If they have no evidence, they attack the source. And so they've been attacking Donald Trump as the source for many, many years now. And only recently have they trained their guns on, used to be their buddy, Elon Musk. I'm hearing that a lot of people, I don't know what the number is, are canceling their Tesla contracts. They were going to buy a Tesla, they were going to buy a truck, and in California they're canceling them. You know, well, what are you going to do, California? You have a mandate. You have to go all electric in the very near future. And there's bad things happening to that mandate. bus companies, your electric bus companies are going BK. Your electric trucking companies are going BK. This is all happening in this calendar year. And you're not going to buy a Tesla, California, ever again because now you hate Elon Musk. Yes, there are other electric cars out there, but how are you going to fulfill this mandate? It's not going to happen. I'll tell you, that's what's going to happen. It's not going to happen. They're going to say, oh, well, we tried, or we'll push the date back, or it was Gavin Newsom's plan. Now we have whoever the new governor is going to be. By the way, Gavin Newsom, in case you don't know, not that I really care, although we all should care, because the election cycle is coming up in 3 years or less, maybe 2 years. He's going to run for president, and now he's trying to re-image himself. He's got a podcast. So, the Gavin Newsom Show, or whatever they're calling it, and he's going to reach out to members of MAGA and have them on the program. Now, Christ said, go to the sinners. But I would say, if Gavin Newsom invited me on his show, I would tell him the same thing that I told Reuters and Associated Press when they reached out to me when I left One America News. And I politely said, go pound salt. That's basically what I said. I don't want to have anything to do with you because you are the enemy. Yes, Christ said go to the sinners. And I think it's appropriate from time to time. But you don't want to promote the devil. And by going on Gavin Newsom's podcast, you're going to be promoting the devil. And we have enough devil going on with this paradigm shift. But this is not just a paradigm shift. And it's not permanent, by the way. So enjoy it while you got it. And I hate to keep harping on this, but it's not permanent until we get it codified some way. And what I mean by that is, if Gavin Newsom's elected in 2028, he's going to undo, like a rubber band, everything that Donald Trump has done. Everything. He's going to build it back better. And he's going to put everything back unless it's permanently deleted by Congress. And Congress must play a role in this, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But when I talk about this is a paradigm ticking time bomb or powder keg, it is a paradigm powder keg, because underneath this waste, fraud, and abuse that DOGE is coming up with, and Donald Trump and his team is uncovering in various departments, underneath all this, not every time, but X amount of time, there is criminal activity. Let's take, for example, these credit cards that, and I'll get to that in a moment, just a second, in detail, but these credit cards that DOGE has uncovered, millions and millions of credit cards used by federal employees. Are we sure, if we audited every purchase, are we sure that every purchase was done with approval of the superiors or knowledge of the superiors? And are we sure that every purchase was for federal government work? Are we sure of all that? And would it pass muster? Would it pass scrutiny? Would it pass an audit? And I don't know if we have the ability to audit all that. There may not be the ability to do all that. I mean, that's a pretty deep dive. But I would wager my house that no, the answer is no. That X amount, I don't know how many, I don't know how much, but X amount of the usages on those credit cards, those government credit cards paid for by you and me, are fraudulent. And the reason I bring this up is if you're committing fraud and you go and you buy a dinner on a government credit card, it's a Saturday night, you're not working, you're out with your girlfriend or your wife or your husband or your boyfriend, and you pull out that American Express and you pay for dinner, you are committing fraud. That is a crime. Now, it is what you might consider a low-level crime, but when you start uncovering what's going on behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. and turning over these rocks like Donald Trump and DOGE are doing, it's going to be much deeper than that, and we already know it is much deeper than that. I'm talking about things like contracts that are perhaps given to family members or directly to government employees. And in particular, of course, when we look at members of Congress, how they, like AOC, go into Congress a bartender and leave, not that she's left yet, but leave a millionaire. So necessarily, when DOGE and Donald Trump uncover the waste, fraud, and abuse, necessarily there are crimes hidden among that. And this is why the left, in particular members of Congress, who of course have the most weight around Washington, D.C., and throw it around, like Nancy Pelosi has her entire career, this is why they're panicking. Because there's a paper trail and a money trail that could lead to them and could lead to them committing some kind of crime, some kind of fraud, defrauding the people of the United States, aka the federal government. And so this has never been seen in the history of Washington, D.C., because all we've seen over the last 100 years or so, and there's a reason why it's a little more than 100 years now, ever since Woodrow Wilson, all we've seen out of Washington, D.C. is layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of government, a growth of government that's just funneled up and created this behemoth now that left hand doesn't know what right hand is doing. And we've seen that time and time again. Elon Musk was telling a story before he joined the Trump team about SpaceX and how they were, the federal government, the EPA, was asking, well, what about the rocket, splashing down into the ocean? That the EPA asked him, what if it hits a shark? So you know what Elon Musk and his team had to do? They had to do a shark study. And lo and behold, they found out the odds of that happening are, about the odds of winning the lotto or higher. And the EPA said, okay, well, I guess that's okay, but what about whales? And so Elon had to study the odds of the canister, the empty canister or whatever is falling down from space and splashing into the Pacific or the Atlantic, probably the Pacific. What are the odds of it hitting a whale? I mean, think about that. When we had the Apollo missions, did any of these scientists, when we went to the moon in the Apollo missions, did any of the scientists say, well, we better figure out whether it's going to hit a seagull on the way down? If it hits a seagull, we better do an environmental impact report. I mean, this is cuckoo stuff. This is the kind of crap that needs to be eliminated. Eliminate the EPA completely, because most states, if they don't, they should have their own version of the EPA, and environmental protection ought to happen on a local level. Look at FEMA. FEMA is a prime example. FEMA has a template, goes into California, Pacific Palisades, with the same template that it goes into effectively in Florida with the hurricanes. I mean, that's just stupid. And we know that FEMA has been weaponized. Eliminate it. Blue pencil it. The federal government should not be a piggy bank for states. I don't like the way, it's not that I don't like it. I should correct that. It is not what the framers of the Constitution wanted. They did not want money fuddling to Washington, D.C., and then the President of the United States or even Congress saying, okay, Utah, you can have this, Washington State, you can have that, Maryland, you can have this, Illinois, you can have that. That's not the job of the federal government, yet that's what we have become. And again, the Department of Education has been weaponized. If you don't participate in LGBTQ crazy books on the shelves, promoting whatever they're promoting, we're going to deny you school lunch money. That's the way it works now. I mean, this is a mess. So how about we don't take the money from people in the state of New Mexico, and we allow them to keep the money at the local level, and then you can use it however the heck you want. And if they blow it, they blow it. It's up to the people to hold them accountable, the people of New Mexico and the 49 other states. But the waste and the abuse is clear. DOGE has covered up, like when they went to Department of Labor, they found all these license keys, when you pay for Microsoft or what have you. They found they found dozens and dozens of Microsoft license keys paid for by you and me and not used. So why? I mean, no, that's a small amount of money, yeah, but small amounts add up. Photoshop. Is there a legitimate reason for the federal government to have Photoshop? I suppose in certain departments doing certain things, but Elon Musk and his team found dozens of paid for Photoshop accounts, but only a trickle of that being used. Department of Education, COVID money. COVID money funneled through the Department of Education. I was just giving you the example. Only this is COVID funds, so it's just extra, another layer of helicopter money coming from the Department of Education. So they give it to the states, and what does a school district in the state of Utah use it on? A lot of money. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially here. Utah school district uses it for baseball games. They probably rented out, leased out a baseball stadium to do whatever, or I don't know what they did. The bottom line is that's the line item. That's what they used it for. In California, just as bad. One school district went out and bought an ice cream truck. I mean, this is total waste and abuse. Credit cards, as I mentioned, there's 4 million of them. 4 million government credit cards, and I think last year they did 90 million transactions for a total of $40 billion. Again, what percentage of that 40 billion is fraud? And there's all forms of fraud that is associated with this waste, fraud, and abuse. It's that fraud segment. The waste, they're trying to clean up. The abuse, they're trying to clean up. It's the fraud that we need to go after. If people are defrauding the federal government, that means they're defrauding you and me. And we need to hold them accountable. And I'll never forget a friend of mine in California during the whole COVID debacle, and as the helicopter money was being meted out, the PPP loans, he says, hey, I'm going to get a PPP loan. You should get one too. And I, thought crossed my head. Well, I'm, working independently now. You have to have certain things on your income tax, he said, and he's going to get $200,000, and I could get it too. And guess what? You're not going to have to pay back that loan. Well, I've never heard of a loan that you don't have to pay back. And to this day, I don't know the status of PPP. If you know, please let me know. Are all the PPP loans forgiven? That's not a loan then. Why do we call it a loan if they're forgiven? That's a gift, a grant. So he says, yeah, I'm going to get 200 grand. I'm going to take that money. I'm going to build a house in Mexico. I mean, for a fleeting moment, I said, wow, that sounds great. And I said, no, wait a minute. This is not right. That's not what that money is intended for, number one. Number two, what happens if you get caught? You're defrauding the government. You could go to jail for something like that. And now DOGE is out there, and God bless him. I don't know what he ever did. Honestly, I don't know if he ever fulfilled his plan. I know that he did build a house in Mexico. So we'll see what happens. Maybe he did it with other funds. I don't know. And I would never expose this person, but that's the kind of stuff that we've seen happen, and we've seen cases of it in the media of people being arrested and being hauled away for defrauding the federal government. But HDMI cables, for example, I recently read in the United States military that they want to have some extra durable HDMI cables. I mean, you're watching me right now because of HDMI cables. And HDMI cables, you could spend a couple bucks on. There are better grades than others, but the kind I get, maybe they're $40, and they're extra long. But the military was paying $10,000 for an HDMI cable. I mean, the contracts, that's how you're going to probably going to get some of the Congress people. These sweetheart contracts that are funneled through their family, a la Joe Biden, or maybe directly into their own businesses. They create a shell company or whatever, and then they get a federal contract. They don't do anything. They just collect the money. That's going to come out. It's going to come out. False billing, same thing. Members of Congress I bet you, we'll find a few that are billing fraudulently. and saying, they did work that they didn't do under their shell company, and reporting workers that don't exist, so-called phantom workers, and work that they didn't do. All this stuff is going to come out eventually, and then it becomes a matter of the Department of Justice. Who are they going to hold accountable? And I would say use the January 6th committee as your model. Use January 6th and what the Department of Justice did toward the January 6th defendants as your model to these people who committed the fraud, who were part of the waste and the abuse, but defrauded the federal government in the process and got rich along the way. Hold them accountable criminally. I'm not talking civilly. I'm talking criminally here. There's only one way to fix this, and that is to do what DOGE and Musk and Trump are doing and then hold people accountable. Otherwise, it's going to happen all over again when there is another Democrat president. And we're going to get another Democrat president. But Congress has got to enter into this picture because, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, none of this is going to be permanent. All of it can snap back under a Democrat administration. And so we have these radical judges. You have Biden judges. You have Obama judges. And we shouldn't be talking this way, but we have to. We have to put that modifier in front of these judges. We have Obama, we have Biden, we have Clinton, and we may have some Carter judges out there still. I don't know. These judges are radical, and some of the appointees of the Bushes were not so strong either. They're radical. They're anti-constitutional. They're radical lawyers dressed in a black robe, and they're putting the brakes, ostensibly putting the brakes on what President Trump is trying to do to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse in Washington, D.C. There are some 70, 80, last I checked, lawsuits trying to stop President Trump at every level. You can have a judge, anybody can bring a lawsuit, right? He's trying to cut back at Department of Education, right? Lay people off. Well, we have a judge who's saying, nope, you can't do that. We have a president right now who's trying to hold fast to the 14th Amendment as it's written. And that is, all people under the jurisdiction thereof are United States citizens. Again, I've used this example a million times. Birthright citizenship is what we're talking about. If the woman from Guatemala stumbles over the border, squats, and has a baby, but she's a Guatemalan citizen and so is the father of the child, if she can prove the father, she's Honduran. The baby's Honduran, not a United States citizen. Why? Because the mother is under the jurisdiction thereof of Honduras, not the United States. And if the mother is under the jurisdiction of Honduras, the child is under the jurisdiction. It just so happens that she had the baby here. If she had the baby in France, France would say, no, I think. Most countries, I'm trying to say, China, would say, no, you're Honduran, you had the baby here, fine, wonderful, congratulations, now get the hell out. That child is not a citizen of China. And the 14th Amendment says explicitly that. So, meantime, we have Congress holding a hearing on the 14th Amendment. Why? Why do we need a hearing on the blatantly obvious? If you want, Congress, I have an idea for you. You want to have a clarification of the 14th Amendment? Go ahead, pass a law. But why are you wasting my time with hearings on both sides of the 14th Amendment? The 14th Amendment is the 14th Amendment. There is no birthright citizenship. Yet we have a judge saying, no, you can't do that. President, okay, Congress, get in gear. Every one of these issues needs to be addressed by Congress to have a permanent solution. We have, of course, these attacks on DOGE. They're trying to stop DOGE, and we have multiple judges weighing in on that. And of course, Donald Trump's efforts to fire or lay off federal workers. Once again, there's injunctions in place. This is insanity. One judge in whatever state, one attorney dressed in a black robe is holding up the entire processes in Washington, D.C. and telling a duly elected president of the United States he cannot do what he was elected to do. Is that what we should be doing in this country? We have 12 months, effectively 12 months, more or less. Because the reason I say 12 months is because there's an election cycle. It's going to start. It's already started, really, but in earnest, we have about 12 months before the election cycle starts, and these Republicans who have no spine anyway are up for re-election. And they're not going to do what needs to be done, like eliminate the IRS. We have 12 months to eliminate the IRS. Can the IRS be eliminated? It's an interesting question. When you read the 16th Amendment, it simply says, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes, which is wholly immoral, by the way, from whatever source derived, very vague, without apportionment. And that's important because the original Constitution says any tax has to be apportioned, that is basically equalized among the states. It says without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. So it basically gave Congress, the 16th Amendment, gave Congress a blank check to make people's lives now, how many years later? 1913, 100 plus years later, we'll just say that, 112 years later, make their lives hell. Look at it this way. And I tell special ed this every once in a while. Imagine if the IRS just went away. You can't even imagine it. You know why? Because you know no different. The only thing you've ever known is taxes. The only thing you've ever known is the IRS. The only thing you've ever known is April 15th. The only thing you've ever known is if you're a worker, they take money out every paycheck. Or if you're an independent contractor, 1099, you have to write a check. Or you have to file quarterly. That's the only thing you've ever known. The only thing you've ever known is when you get a letter from the IRS and you go, oh no, right? I've had those. They said that I had a 401k when I didn't have a 401k. Yet, when I said I didn't have one, they said, okay, prove it. How do you prove? How do you prove that you don't have a 401k? How do you go about that? I mean, the burden of proof was on me to prove to the IRS what they were accusing me of. I mean, what? This is cuckoo. But this is the way the IRS operates. You know that. Everybody has their horror stories. Audits, mini audits, whatever. But imagine if all that went away. Imagine if you didn't have to worry about writing off the interest on your mortgage anymore. That wasn't even a factor. Imagine you didn't have to worry about having to keep a house for 2 years before you can sell it so you're not hit with some sort of taxes. Imagine that. Imagine, and in Florida, God bless Governor DeSantis, who he's batting about 500, maybe a little bit more. He's got some real problems that he's not looking at, but he's now proposing that Florida eliminate property tax. Property tax is also immoral. Why do you say that, Graham? I'll tell you why. Because if you don't pay your property tax, what happens? The government comes and seizes your house. That means that you don't own your house. That means that the government owns the property and the house that it sits on. Because if it can be taken away like that for so-called non-payment of taxes, that means it's not your house. That means that the government owns that house. And so property taxes and income taxes are immoral. Property taxes, because of what I just said, that is your house that they're threatening to take away. That's yours. The government shouldn't have that power, okay? Income tax is immoral because you have decided in your finite time on this planet to work. You don't have to work. You could do something else. You could just farm or whatever. You could move to the country and just farm, get off the grid, as they say, right? And decide not to work. If you never work, you never pay taxes. You're never in the system. You're never on the grid. I suppose there are people out there like that. I'm not. But so you make a conscious decision to work, and most of us do, but it is a decision. So how come that person living off the grid doesn't pay income taxes just because they're not collecting a paycheck? It's wholly immoral to tax your income. You're on this planet for a finite amount of time, and you decide to work. That's not at the privy of government. The government doesn't have a right to take your money. Is a residue of your time. And so if government is taking your money from your work, aka income, they are taking your time. They are stealing your time. Does that make sense? In case you want to know about the 16th Amendment, I don't know how many states there were back then. Probably 48, maybe, in 1913. I don't know. Somebody can check that one and let me know. But all the states ratified it. I'm shocked by that. How did the 16th Amendment pass? Would the 16th Amendment pass in this environment today? All the states ratified it, except if you're living in one of these states, you have a heck of a legacy. Connecticut, Rhode Island, Utah, Virginia. Interesting that 3 of those are the 13 colonies. Utah saying no. Also saying no, by the way, by not even taking it up. Florida and Pennsylvania. So we had 6 states that basically either said no or indirectly said no to the 16th Amendment. And God bless them for that. Imagine if we had enough states with the brains or the spine to say no to the federal government. Leads me to my Ledger Register at grahamledger.com if you'd like to answer the question. The Ledger Register is, does Congress have the political guts to eliminate the IRS? You have 2 choices there. Yes, Congress will grow a spine and do it. No, Congress does not have the guts. I don't think Congress has the guts. Just like Congress doesn't have the spine to impose term limits on itself. It doesn't have the spine to do that. It's unfortunate, but I see what's going on in Washington right now with the budget process, and it's business as usual. This is the problem in Washington, D.C. It's business as usual. No, we need to have reconciliation. No, we're going to pass this. By the way, I see on social media, and I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but don't get your news from social media, please. Get it from me, because I verify everything. It's in my DNA, okay, as a news person. I don't just take somebody's word for it. I check it. And when you drill down and you check with these posts that they're seeing that, oh, they passed the budget, which means that there's going to be no tax on tips and no tax on Social Security, you're dreaming, okay? It's not in there. I'm sorry, but it's not in there. And I know I've seen a bazillion posts on there, euphoric conservatives saying that no tax on tips and no tax on Social Security, but it's not done. I'm not saying it won't happen. It could happen, but what happens now is the reconciliation process between the House and the Senate, and they have to figure out ways to move funds around, which leads me to something else. But I'll get to that in just a second. But the bottom line is, there's no wording in this legislation that says, hey, tips will not be taxed anymore and Social Security will not be taxed anymore. So if you're on Social Security and you want your, it never should have been taxed. Those dollars have been taxed already. How in the world that got through Congress? Where were we? Were we asleep at the switch on that one, just like the 13th or the 16th Amendment in 1913? How in the hell did that pass? Taxing Social Security. What a twist of the knife in the backs of all retired Americans. Disgusting. That's more important than no tax on tips. But if you are a waitress or a waiter, if you're a hairstylist, barber, and you rely on tips for a living, then call your Congress people and tell them, hey, Donald Trump promised this, now you make it work. Now. And you retired people out there on Social Security, you know what to do. You've been doing it your whole life. Pick up the phone right now and say, hey, dude or dudette, I want you to make sure that you don't tax my Social Security because that's immoral, completely. And that's the argument. Be nice about it, but say, hey, listen, that's immoral. What you're taxing Social Security is immoral. I already paid taxes on that money, and you're taxing it again. That's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. Don't you think so? Oh, my buddy's back on here. Luther. I love your show, he says. Thanks, Luther. I thought I said Luther the first time. Congress, what worries me about Congress right now is that they appear to be doing business as usual. With this, we need to reconcile this, and at least Thomas Massey, Congressman Massey, has a principles and a backbone. He's the lone Republican who voted no. Am I happy it passed? I guess so. But again, it smells way too much of business as usual to me. Massey has principles, and he says, look, it's going to add hundreds of billions of dollars to the national debt. What have we done here? Nothing. They haven't done nothing. Nothing different. Have they considered in this budget, wait a minute, Donald Trump is trying to eliminate the IRS. Maybe we should defund it or cut it way back. Wait a minute, Donald Trump is trying to eliminate the Department of Education. Why don't we just eliminate it in this package? What a novel idea. You want to save money? How much is the budget for the Department of Education? I'm going to Google that right now, even though I don't like Google. Let's see, Department Education annual budget. 268 for fiscal year 2024, $268 billion. That's just the budget itself. Lord knows what else goes along with that, but let's just go with that. That's $250 billion. Okay, you would save $250 billion right there by eliminating the Department of Education, and it's gone in perpetuity. So that is blue penciled forever. I mean, because I don't think, unless the dynamic changes strongly, it swings strongly in the Democrat column, that I don't think that comes back. And the same can happen with the EPA. I would gather the EPA's budget's even larger. And the same can happen for Department of Energy. Same thing. Probably same budget. Imagine right there. You could blue pencil probably $1 trillion annually. Annually. The big one, the big tomato, of course, is not defense. That's the one thing mandated in the Constitution that the federal government needs to do. You can't spend too much on defense, in my opinion. HHS, that's the big tomato. And that's the one that I believe is $1.1, $1.2 trillion annually, the budget. That is the big one. And I don't know if Elon has gone after that. But when you hear members of Congress or members of the media go out there and they hear them on CNBC, well, Donald Trump wants to have all these tax cuts. How's he going to pay for it? You have to stop people. If you're hearing this in person, you have to stop them and say, excuse me. That is is it a non sequitur? Well, it's economically illiterate. It's an economically illiterate statement. Why? You don't pay for tax cuts. Yet, this is a term that's being used and thrown around by Republican members of Congress. Well, we have to pay for the tax cuts. No. When you cut taxes, you deal with whatever the budget, the amount of money is remaining. That's your budget. Look at it this way. If in your family budget, you decide to buy a new car and the payment is $1,000 a month, you have just pulled $1,000 a month out of your family budget, right? So that leaves X amount, and you have to live on that X amount. Same thing with the federal government. Only we are removing X. You don't, in other words, at home, you don't keep spending that $1,000 like it was there. No, because it's not there anymore. But that's the way the federal government works. We remove, this is their mentality, you see. You remove $1,000 a month out of their budget, they'll keep spending that $1,000. Or how are we going to pay for that missing $1,000? See, that's, you don't say when you go out and buy that new car and you spend $1,000 a month, you don't say, how am I going to, you say, of course, how am I going to pay for this? But you don't say, how am I going to replace that $1,000 a month? Maybe you do, but if you do, you're going to work for it. That's not the way Congress works. Congress is going to say, well, if we're going to cut here, we need to take there. See, because the federal government knows one thing, and that's taking from U.S. citizens. The federal government, remember, produces nothing. Does it do some positive? Yes, like the military. But the other mandated items, like the post office and printing money, is a disaster. Look, it costs how much? 6 cents to print a penny? And I think 14 cents to print a nickel? Somewhere around there. I mean, this is cuckoo. Only the federal government could spend 14 cents to mint a nickel. It's like cuckoo land. So, you are an economic illiterate if you say we have to pay for the tax cuts. So just remember that. Please don't let anybody get away with that. We do not pay for tax cuts. Tax cuts are tax, and the other thing it assumes, by the way, is that that money is the federal government's money. That money being your money. So when you cut taxes, you get to keep more of your money. So the assumption of paying for tax cuts means that you're trying to make sure you can claw back as much as your money. They're trying to make sure they can claw back as much of your money as they can. And that is called, in my mind, that is called stealing. So there is no paying for a tax cut, okay? That is an economically illiterate statement. A couple things I want to get to. Maybe I should go to the viewer mail. Quickly, viewer mail. First one comes to us from Danny. I'm a New Jersey resident, unfortunately. Condolences, Danny. Bill Spadia is running for governor, and he's a big supporter of the Trump MAGA movement. I'm hoping that we can get a state division of voter security. In other words, Danny is saying that there's voter fraud and fraudulent activity going on in New Jersey. That's hard to imagine, Danny, but look, if you go to my website, you'll see the amendments that I wish we could get passed in this country, but I'm never going to see it. I'm not being a pessimist. It's just no one's talking about constitutional amendments. But among the amendments that I proffer up there, I think number one is federal election reform. ID, proving citizenship. Mail ballots must be hardship only and notarized. Imagine that. Mail ballots, only hardship cases, aka the military, and they must be notarized. We'll have to have a notary in the United States Army. We have LGBTQ services in the Army. We can get a notary out there during an election cycle, I do believe. And by the way, X amount of military service members are probably notaries already. A single election day, no early voting, no. Look what they just did in Europe. Or in Germany. They voted in one day, and they had the election results in one day. So we got those three, paper ballots only, as Donald Trump wants, and also repeal of the 1993 Voter Registration Act, which opened the door for voter fraud through motor voter and a whole bunch of other nefarious activities. So that's my solution, because it's not just New Jersey. Clearly, that's the problem. Randy writes, national debt should be reduced by those savings from DOGE, and ongoing savings should also occur. How can we expect action from Congress when so many hands are so dirty on both sides of the aisle? I was just telling Special Ed that it's amazing how quiet members of Congress have been on both sides during the DOGE phase. They're not, well, the Democrats are screaming because they know their gravy train is in trouble. But the Republicans have been mysteriously silent. I'm just wondering how many of those members of Congress are dirty as well. You know, this is a bipartisan problem. And so what are we going to do? Here's a good question. What are we going to do if we go up the food chain and we find out AOC is dirty or a Republican member of Congress is dirty? I'm not singling out AOC. I'm just saying pick your member, your Democrat representative. So a Democrat representative is dirty, fraudulent, committed fraud, and a Republican member of Congress committed fraud. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle that as a country? You're going to do a recall election? I don't think that's severe enough. I think you need to hold these members of Congress accountable just as you would the January 6ers. Again, use January 6th as a model. But Randy's right, they're dirty. The only question is how many of them are dirty? Not all of them are dirty, but how many of them are dirty and to what degree? And are we going to find out through DOGE? I believe that this is a paradigm shifting moment that is a powder keg. And the only question is the collateral damage when this powder keg explodes. Hopefully it's not us. Bobby writes, Graham, you're right. Women do have their limits. See, now you're going to get me in trouble, Bobby. Some outdo men on some things, but I think men should hold the presidency. This, I think, was from our discussion of the plane that crash landed upside down in Toronto. We do know, by the way, at this moment, that there was a male pilot and a female first officer. The male pilot had like a couple decades of experience flying airplanes, and the female pilot had maybe a year or two at the most. She's a first officer. The way that plane came in, and the way the flaps were deployed or not deployed, and the way it landed so hot, I just can't imagine a 20-year veteran landing a plane like that unless he was drunk. I think we're going to discover, hopefully soon. I mean, I don't know. I guess that part of the strategy these days is to just wait out the news cycle and then don't, trickle out some information. But I'm gonna guess that we're eventually going to find out that it was the FO, the first officer at the controls of that aircraft. And if you know the answer definitively and you've got proof, don't just send me an email saying, yeah, it was the female first officer at the controls. You got to back it up with proof. GrahamLedger411@gmail.com, GrahamLedger411@gmail.com. All I have to say is this. And remember, I have a daughter who I love and support. And I taught to drive. When I taught her to drive, I said, I'm going to teach you to drive like a man, not an Asian female. And she looked at me and she said, Dad, I am an Asian female. My daughter's part Asian. I said, sorry. And so when she got in the driver's test the second time, first one she had trouble with, second time, taught her to back up. First thing she did was, the first thing they had her do was back up, put her arm on the seat next to her and look behind her. She passed right there. That's what guys do. Okay, so my point is this. If you're a woman, I'm just going to leave it at this, okay? And you want to parallel park, who would you choose to parallel park your car and get it done expeditiously and without damage? Would you rather have a male or a female? I mean, I've seen ladies attempt to parallel. I know women that won't even attempt to parallel park. I don't know. It's a spatial thing. Women have different, yes, women can multitask better, absolutely. I see them at the grocery store all the time, yapping away and buying tomatoes. I can't do that. I gotta say, hey, I gotta get out the phone, I'm shopping. Buy my tomatoes. I can't do that. But spatial things, time, space things, yeah, women have trouble with that. And so that goes to flying an airplane, and it goes to being an air traffic controller. The other thing about women, you guys know this, I'm not saying anything radical. Women are, any married guy will tell you this, are argumentative. And in the air traffic control position, maybe that's not a great thing to do. There's difference between men and women. Women are better at other stuff, and fine, But I know plenty of women that say, hey, I don't want a female president.